All right, everyone. It's Friday, and it is the Manufacturing E-commerce Success Series. I'm one of your hosts, Damon Pistolka, and this pretty gentleman right over beside me here is Kurt Anderson. And today we're going to be taking a deep dive inside of manufacturing digital transformation. And I'm just going to turn it over to Kurt and let it go from there.
Damon, thank you, brother. Appreciate you. God, look at that handsome guy over there, man. Just like Damon, you're just glowing today. We're having a little golf conversation today, and
Yep.
Man, who knew Damon was like Kim? He's like nearly a scratch golfer, but we'll talk about that another time.
That was years ago, though.
All right, guys. Hey, welcome. Happy Friday. We're here to talk about stop being the best kept secret. So, guys, we've got Val's in the house. John Baglino, Dan Bigger is here. Dan's tight with Kim, so he knows the MEP world here in New York. So, guys, I have a great, what an absolute honor and privilege this is today. So, a couple intros. So I'm going to start with my dear friend, Kim Lloyd. Kim is I got this backwards. Kim's over in that corner there. So Kim Lloyd from FuseHub, the New York MEP. Kim, happy Friday. Good afternoon. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. So, guys, we're going to take a deep dive into the MEP network. That's FuseHub is the MEP here in New York. And so this handsome devil down here, we're going to talk about Steve Pomeroy. Steve, the president of Schatz Bearing in Poughkeepsie, New York. Steve, how are you doing today?
Well, now that I'm talking to you, Kurt, it's a great day.
Hey, Steve, could you talk to my wife and explain that to her? That, like it's a better day when you talk to Kurt. I'm just kidding. So, guys, this is what an honor, what a privilege. So, like Damon, our goal is we never want to be the smartest guy in the Zoom, right? Never so. Kim over here, or she's over there. Kim over there, she has her bachelor's degree from University of Buffalo. She has an MBA from RPI. So just brilliant. She is truly an e-commerce pioneer. If you go, guys, connect with Kim here on LinkedIn. If you go to her profile, Damon, she's such a pioneer in e-commerce. She actually has a title, Electric Commerce. So Kim, commerce, and then we still call it electric commerce. Am I correct?
Yep.
So you're an absolute rock star. I've had the honor privilege of working with you. I just admire, respect you more than you know, and you've become a dear friend. So thank you. And we're going to take a deep dive in our work here today with Schatz. Now, Steve, question for you. Again, Damon, once again, not the smartest guy in the room here today. So how does a guy go a PhD from MIT? What can you talk to us a little bit about when you were a little guy growing up? Was there any foreshadowing that you're going to go into manufacturing, or do you have anything there that you could share?
Well, I have a cute story. I'd like to, I tell people I have an assignment. I think when I was in kindergarten or first grade, which I think they asked what you wanted to be. And I said that I wanted to be a ball bearing maker. So when people see that in my office, I say that I had vision back 50 plus years ago, but really it was, my dad worked at a ball bearing company, and I think he had a father-son day or daughter day. And so everybody was bringing their kids in that day. And so that's how the assignment was made. But I'd like to think that I had the vision back then, but clearly not, because why would you go get a PhD in electrical engineering and end up making ball bearings? But that's what I like this.
Absolutely. That's awesome, man. I love that story. So again, guys, we have Steve Pomeroy here, president of Schatz Bearing in Poughkeepsie, New York. And please connect with Steve on LinkedIn. You want to check out their website. He's done amazing work there. So Steve, let's slide right into that. What's funny, Damon, dude, I'm 53, still trying to figure out what I want to do when I grow up. And here Steve knows exactly what he wants to do back in.
Well, that's what I'm saying. A, you knew what you wanted to do, and B, you wrote it out. I want to be a ball bearing manufacturer. And then you go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
It's that's something.
So Steve, let's take a dive into that. So walk us through. So, a PhD from MIT, goodness gracious, you're one of the most humble guys I've ever met. And so that is such a massive accomplishment. Kind of walk us through okay, so high school years, you go off to college. What inspired you to pursue your PhD in electrical engineering?
Well, I think I've always been, a curious person. Even as a kid, I was curious about lots of things, and I knew I liked math and science. And so when that was one of the schools that I got into, it was an easy decision for me to go there. So I think it was just curiosity that brought me there. A curiosity in math and science.
Perfect. So again, guys, happy Friday. Thanks for joining us. We got Dan Bigger. Guys, let us know where you're coming from. Drop a note. Again, you want to connect with Kim Lloyd here. You want to connect with Steve on LinkedIn. So Steve,
Yeah,
okay.
look at Valerie. Valerie's saying Kim rocks.
There's Val right there. So we actually, Damon, we all met in person right at Val at Monofrex there. So we had a good time. Dan knows
nice.
At FuseHub. He said Dan dropped a note. I feel like I'm back in New York. So hey, Dan, welcome back to New York, brother. So Steve, you go through your PhD. So what was that transition? How do you go from a PhD to all of a sudden becoming president of a ball bearing manufacturer? How did that happen?
Well, I mean, this is one of the things that, I have teenage kids, and sometimes they'll say things that they don't, like a class they don't like, and they say, well, I'm never going to do this. And I tell them, you never know what you're going to end up doing. So, especially with a world that's changing as quickly as,
yes,
there's probably going to be fields that don't exist. I know that there are going to be fields that don't exist in the future. So, it's too early to close doors. But anyway, that's a sidelight.
Sure.
I would say, even when I was in the technical side of electrical engineering, I always had an interest in small business, startup type of possibility. And when I was in an undergrad and then starting into grad school, my family got involved in this business. And after a couple of years, when I'd go home for holidays, my parents would talk to me, and they floated the idea, would you be interested in going, taking over this business? And my initial reaction, of course, was, that's not in my field. I don't want to do it. And but over time, they convinced me, well, you won't get the opportunity to learn from them and my dad and my mom, and that I would kind of, if I went off on this, entrepreneurial path, that I wouldn't have that sort of support or so I looked at it as a way of, even if I didn't stay with it, it was an opportunity to learn small business and so forth. So the deal I made with them was, there are a lot of people that were sort of dropping out of the PhD program because they just couldn't do it. And I didn't want to just drop out and pursue this. So I made a deal. I just said, well, I'm going to finish the PhD. And I knew my dad was later in his career. And I just said, if after a year or two, it was not for me, it's a nice fallback plan. So I could just go back on my originally planned career path. So that was the deal I made. I got the PhD and immediately went and worked at a bearing company, which was sort of a head scratcher for my thesis advisor at MIT, but I don't think that's typically what happens, but that's what happened for me.
What was the original plan? So Schatz going into ball bearing manufacturing was plan B. What was plan A?
Well, plan A, I did do some interviewing. I don't know if it's really relevant to this discussion, but I was going to be in analog circuit design. And so I was going to go work for a company that was in that field and sort of get my feet wet. And then at some point down the road, look for opportunities for small business or a startup or something like that. I think that's what I envisioned anyway.
Yeah. Well, perfect. And, and I don't know if the movie, in the 80s, Dan Bigger dropped a fantastic line and it went right over my head. Dan, I have to admit, he dropped a Fletch line. So, Steve, did the movie Fletch have anything to do with you getting into ball bearing? Just kidding. Because we all follow Chevy Chase, of course. But was there, Dan? That was classic. Thank you, brother.
Yeah, it was. That was good.
Steve, you got into so you find your career, you evolve, land your complete your PhD. God bless you. What a massive, massive accomplishment. Stuck with your guns and completed that. And then you slide into, I believe, 1989, 1990-ish. You start your career as president of Schatz. What was that transition like? Like, how did you, as a young man coming into manufacturing, tell us a little bit like that journey in the early 90s. What was going on from that standpoint?
Oh, Kurt, you're going to make me go down memory lane here. Well, first of all, you go from a research lab environment to a real world, to get your hands dirty type of. So it was quite a change. There's no question about it. And I think the other thing is that in the early 80s, the reason, and I won't go into all the details because we don't have time, but the reason my family got involved with this company was that a company went bankrupt. It was restarted. It was trying to kind of emerge from that bankruptcy. And, when a large company goes bankrupt, so if the many years that precede the bankruptcy are typically, you're not making the proper investment
Mhm.
equipment and all that stuff. So there were a ton of challenges in front of us at that.
No doubt.
So to say that it was a radical change is probably an understatement. Go from what I was doing to, but I like to think of myself as pretty flexible and resilient, so we made it work.
So a PhD in electrical engineering, and then you earned quickly a PhD in resiliency on entrepreneurship, right? Is that what we're hearing?
Yeah, no, I talk to my wife. I say, that if I collect some of the experiences, I could write a pretty interesting book about, the things the challenges we overcame, the people that we came and went and we met, some on the kookier side than others. And so it's been an interesting ride for sure.
I bet. And with that right there, if you could share, so in the past 30 years, kind of, how have you evolved as an entrepreneur, manufacturer, in your leadership? Any tips for, say, your younger self, or say if there's a someone fresh, new entrepreneur, any generation or any age, but let alone say a 20-something out there and there where you are, 30 years ago, what's advice or what have you seen evolve over the past 30 years through your career?
Well, I think and this is not going to be anything that's an eye opener. In fact, hopefully it doesn't come across as cliche, because I don't, I really believe it. It's if I could, rewind and start over and do anything differently, I would say I would put a much stronger emphasis on just the people side of the business, because like I said, when you have a bankruptcy situation, you're just, in some cases, just focusing from week to week. We got to make payroll. We got to, you're not saying, well, what you don't have as long-term a vision, I guess, at that point. You can't, if you're kind of coming out of that situation. And also, I think, mentioning people, it's harder to attract the right kind of talent when you're struggling. If you're financially trying to come out of a situation like that, you want to pay the best wages, you want to get the best people, you want to lay out the best, future, and it's much more of a challenge to do it in that environment. But having said that, I still would try to focus harder on the getting the right people in the right spots, because having the benefit of looking in hindsight, once I did get some of the right people in the right, we just kind of took off and everything kind of fell at that point. And Kurt, you generously talk about my degree and so forth, but I'll be the first to say that I do not have all the answers. I don't. You need people with different backgrounds and different viewpoints, because that all comes together for a path that I think has been a really great one for us.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Because it does. You're right. It's as a leader, I think, and you show us with Schatz, is you have to have other people with different skills around you, because that's how you make a great company.
Absolutely. 100%. So that would be the one thing I would, my young self, I would, but it's hard sometimes, you have somebody that has a background in what you need, but they have, flaws in other areas. Mm-hmm. And you're struggling to, get a piece of equipment repaired or whatever. You don't focus on that, but I wish I had done a better job with that.
Yeah. Well, and what I admire, Steve, and again, my respect and admiration for you is off the charts. And, I've had the honor and privilege. I've met some of your teammates. You've put together just an all-star team with Kirk and John and Nick, who I've met. And so, and it's just a testament to your leadership of, when you think about, Damon, we talk about this all the time, the average business, 4 out of 5 businesses close in their first 5 years.
Yep.
And that number perpetuates every 5-year bucket. So when you think, Steve, you've been in business, survived, thrived, good years, tough times, my goodness, all of a sudden we get this little thing, COVID, thrown at us, but goodness gracious, you've survived 6 cycles of those 5-year windows, if we look at it in that capacity. So kudos to you. And I think that number goes down to it's like a fraction of a percent of entrepreneurs that can stay in business at that 30th year. It's a very small number. So,
and then you look at it too, though, and going from first generation to second generation business, I think it's only 16% of businesses ever do that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tight.
You know,
So
from your
Steve,
father and mother to you. That's incredible as well.
yeah. So
It's not just surviving that long, but being able to transfer that too.
exactly. And just,
Well, I learned a lot of good things from my folks. So they gave me a great
Oh yeah.
big start. There's no question. So
I got to ask one question though. You come out, you got this PhD from MIT. Did people look at you like you're supposed to know this just because you got a degree from MIT, even though you're in electrical engineering and we're talking about making bearings?
Well, first of all, it's not like, I walked in with, my degrees in my office. And
Yeah.
I didn't lead with that. I basically was just trying to, in fact, one of the things I tried to do was, there was an overlap for when my dad worked there for 5 years or so. And he says, use this time to do whatever you feel you need to try to learn different aspects of the business. So I would just, wherever we had a problem, I would just say, hey, what are you doing? Can I learn what you're doing? And so I learned to run equipment. I learned to set up equipment. I learned our purchasing department and, our customer service. So it was a good, and of course I learned a lot from my dad just over those 5 years. In fact, the first year when I transitioned out of college, this is not a knock on them, but they couldn't pay me what I was able to get salary wise. So I lived with them for the first year when I transitioned out. So we talked bearings day and night, and sometimes it was just like overwhelming. I had to kind of take a step away or go see friends for a weekend. In the long run, it's really good for me. But getting back to your question, I wasn't dodging the question. I don't, it's not like people call me Dr. Steve or, it's not that kind of environment. So now the one aspect in my life, though, that you'll laugh at is that if people do know you have a PhD from MIT and you make what all of us do from time to time, like a dumb mistake or say something dumb, you don't get the pass that other people get.
You don't get the mulligan, right? But
you
don't get Steve doesn't get the mulligan. He's got a PhD from MIT, dude. Like,
what do you mean you can't fix the toaster?
Exactly.
Right. Oh, that's great. That's hysterical. So, all right. So let's slide over. This is fantastic. So, and Damon, what I love, we had a great conversation with the founder of Reebok last week, and Joe Foster was talking about when he founded Reebok, he and his wife, lived in the factory. So Steve, again, when you're an entrepreneur, scrappy, you do what you have to do to survive.
Yeah.
So Kim, let's slide over. Let's get you in the game here for a minute. So let's talk about a couple things again, guys. If you're just Adam's here today, Adam, thank you for joining us. And anybody, please drop a note. Let us know you're here. Connect with Kim Lloyd. Kim is with FuseHub, the New York MEP. We have Steve Pomeroy, the president of Schatz Bearing. So Kim, e-commerce pioneer, you've really been, off the charts. Website e-commerce since the mid '90s. Talk a little bit about, your experience. And then what I'd like to do is I'm going to slide right into and just give everybody an intro on what and who is FuseHub.
Sure. I think e-commerce has had an interesting journey over the past few decades. I think that if you would have seen the first e-commerce website that I designed, you'd things have come a long way, that's for sure. So I think that the way that e-commerce has evolved over the years is that it has to be a much more instant gratification experience. We thought we were doing a good job before, but now it has to really almost address all your senses. You have to people have much shorter attention spans nowadays. So you really can't make them think too hard, but yet you have to have the information there for them to make an educated buying decision, because their willingness to pick up a phone and call a salesperson versus looking at your website is just not there anymore. So people are just looking at buying in so many different ways, wherever they are sitting, whenever they think top of mind of what they want. And so it's really important to address all of that. And that's not something we had to deal with in the early days. The MEP system is kind of a public-private partnership between NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and also private entities across the U.S. I mean, every single state in the U.S. has an MEP center. Some have 1, some have 10 or 11, like New York does. And, there's one in Puerto Rico, Alaska, Hawaii. They're all over the place. Yep. The goal of the MEP system is really to help, you can get business advice from SBDCs and investors. I mean, there's business advice all over the place. But when you're running a manufacturing company, you need to have some specialized knowledge. You need to know, hey, what's going on out there about Industry 4.0? How do I lean my manufacturing? What kind of equipment is out there for me? What's some best practice that we've learned across sharing from state to state, even from other countries? What are some of those best practices out there? And what resources are out there to help my manufacturing company? I'm getting killed from trade deficits, so I really need to know what's out there in programs like TAC or WDI for training. So it's the MEP's job to really stay on top of that information. It's the MEP's job to really understand the manufacturing business. So it's great when we can work with a company like Schatz and really help bring some of that expertise to bear.
That's fantastic. And so, what I want to slide into, and Adam dropped a funny note: to have a PhD and not be afraid to ask a question, that's humility. Now, Damon, I hate to say it. Steve, if I had a PhD, I'd probably have it on my T-shirt, hey, yeah. I have a PhD, right? Damon, would you? So I'm just teasing. And what's awesome, Steve, when you and I connected, Damon, we were putting on some, we call it our DWI training, and it's like, digital marketing training for manufacturers. Steve, you and I connected, man. And I'll tell you what was so inspiring. Man, you were there. You're like the first person at class. You're the first person at our workshops. You had sleeves rolled up and ready to rock and roll. And like, you were just an eager learner to dive into, figuring out this whole digital transformation. What inspired you to take that step, to take that leap of like, hey, I've been at this for 30 years. I still have a hunger to learn new strategies, new tactics. What inspired you to make this digital transformation at Schatz?
Well, I think that and this has been evolving for many years, but your company's presence on the web is about as important as any aspect of the business. I mean, you could make the greatest product in the world, but if you're not getting that out there to somebody to know and to see, then you're going nowhere. It's kind of like someone saying 50 years ago, well, sales is the most important part of the company. Mm-hmm. It still applies, but now it's in a world where the internet makes the website be your face to the world. And so I am a very curious person, and I do, get involved in a number of things, but even being a small business, I can't get involved in everything. But in this, I see it as something that's important enough that we got to make sure that we're putting our best face out to the world. And I think the other thing is, being a small company, I am by no means an expert. I've learned a lot from you guys over the last several months, but I'm still no means an expert in this. But I am a pretty experienced customer of this. We've engaged with a number of different organizations, and I think that there's a lot of layers to making something like this work. It's not just making a pretty website. It's what's the content on the website, and you've taught me that are you speaking to your soulmates, the people that are that you're targeting, that you're trying to sell your product to. So it's the content there, and then the next layer are there keywords so that if people haven't just landed on your website, how do you get them there? And so there's a lot of different aspects to it, and I think what makes it hard for a small web developing company is that you need a lot of different aspect or expertise there. And what we've found is when we go to a company, if they're a really large company, they probably have all the expertise, but they don't necessarily give you a lot of attention. And if they're a smaller company, odds are they don't have all of that expertise. So we've been kind of struggling to find the right fit. And so what I've been really impressed about this experience is that you check all those boxes. You have the different people that have the different expertise, and yet you give us the attention for us, not only to do it, but to, have us understand what. So I can't say that it's all worked because we're too far early. It's too early in the process, but I'm really optimistic just based on what I've seen, and that we are checking all those boxes. So I give kudos to the all the things that you're trying to do.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. And guys, hey, Bonnie's here. Kim, Bonnie.
Yeah.
And, she's in Manhattan. Great manufacturer. Gal's in the house today. Gal, thank you for joining us today. Of course, John and Dan, Adam, all you guys that are here, thank you. Drop a note if you're just popping in with us. Again, we're here with Kim Lloyd, and we're here with Steve Pomeroy. Steve is a president of Schatz Bearing in Poughkeepsie, New York, and we've got Kim from FuseHub. And I want to do a recap here real quick, Steve. So what I love about this process, here's a manufacturer 30 years in and still had that hunger, the eagerness, and the curiosity to be as competitive as possible, and acknowledging like, hey, I need to step up my game. And guys, as Kim just said, if you're not familiar with the MEP network, that's the Manufacturing Extension Partnership. And this is a different animal, so again, if you're retail, restaurant, there's a whole different marketing initiative. And Kim, what I love what you do is you live with those, you're e-commerce pioneer, but you love working with those B2B industrial companies. And that's where you live. And that's why it's a great fit for you. And what I love, I learn from you every time you and I engage. I view your website architect genius, I think. So when you say there's a manufacturer out there and they're like, man, I'm really kind of digging this, I like this conversation, reach out to your MEP, reach out to that subject matter expert to help you with that process. Just share a little bit of like, how do you approach, a client like Steve or other manufacturers? How do you help them kind of make that digital transformation? What's like a good starting point that you advise folks to go with?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the most important thing, and I think you kind of did some of that heavy lifting earlier, which is talk about the buyer persona and really understand the buyer journey. So who is it that is your top most customers? Mm-hmm. How do they process information? How do they get from being aware of who you are to exploring what you have to offer, to evaluating you against others that produce ball bearings, for example, to making that buy decision and then become an advocate for you. So you really need to start with really understanding those personas. And I think if you've already done that, great. We can start right off with making sure the information architecture of your website is structured in such a way that it speaks to those buying personas. A lot of people think of a website as, okay, what's the homepage look like? And that's really almost the last thing you do. That's like building a house with only the front door. Okay. Yeah. You're not going to do that. So right. You've really got to think, how many bedrooms do you want? Do you have someone who's disabled and they need a ramp to get into the house? So you really need to make sure that you're matching those buyer personas with the information and how you've laid it out on your website, so that it's a really natural process. So in Steve's case, they had, and every company is different. Some have great foundation. Some have really good paint and wallpaper, which is the look and feel of the site. Some people really have good SEO. Maybe they've got a domain that's been out there for 50 years, and their website is loaded like lightning because they haven't really done anything fancy with it yet. So every company has a different starting point. So it was great. Schatz had a ton of awesome information, and it was really just making sure that if a purchasing agent who just got told that they needed to buy an R series ball bearing, they could get to that very, very quickly without having to go through a lot of the informational side that maybe an engineer might want to know when they're doing the evaluation process. So it's really important to really think about the foundation first. And that's why in some cases you start with the foundation and then you move to making the paint and the wallpaper and the kitchen design great. You go from the start of the foundation and then you start building out the look and feel.
Yeah. Well, and then you bring up a great point, Kim, is a company like Schatz Bearing and in their digital transformation, they've got different types of customers they need to really appeal to or have the right information for. The engineer that's going to specify a bearing, the technical information, the things that they need there, and then make it easy for the purchasing person to then get that thing bought and in when they need it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely right. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
widely varied too, what you got to produce for that.
Right. And really taking a deep dive understanding to that buyer persona. And this is hysterical, Damon. You'll love this. So we brought in our dear friend Wesleyan. We all love Wesleyan Greer. And boy, if you're out there, Wesleyan, we send our love to you.
Killer.
She came in and worked with the Schatz team and took them through that buyer persona. And it was funny as we were, and then one of a gentleman on Steve's team, he came in a little bit later in the process. And so we're going through describing that buyer persona. And a young man is a phenomenal guy. His name's Nick. He sat there, goes, Kurt, he goes, you guys are describing me. He's like, and remember that, Steve? It was like, it was awesome. It was so spot on in how Wesleyan, did that. But Kim, and again, here's what I want to do, guys. I want to, if you're a manufacturer out there and this is a little bit of a new process, look what Steve did is they went through that buyer journey. We hear that a lot, that buyer journey, that customer journey. But, Damon, what I love working with Kim is like, I've been doing e-commerce a long time, man. I realize like how low level I am compared to Kim. Kim, what I love, what you've really taught me is that it's not just a buyer journey, it's a customer success path. And I feel like there's a big difference there. When we talk about a customer, that buyer journey, either versus or compared to, Kim, what you've really taught me, that customer success path. So Steve, let's slide into this. We went into that buyer persona and then, talk a little bit about, educate everybody out here. Like, again, I'm a manufacturer, I'm a custom manufacturer, I'm an OEM, I make my widgets, whatever. We introduce a fun, we try to make this whole learning process fun. We introduce a term called RICs. Can you educate everybody, what is a RIC, and share everybody, what are your RICs specifically at Schatz?
Well, this is one of the things that I learned through this process, that this is ridiculously important keywords.
RIK, right, guys? So I learned this a long way from another client of mine introduced that to me. I'm like, dude, I'm stealing it. I'm not even going to I'm shameless about it. Ridiculously important keywords. So learn your RICs. Steve, what are the RICs going on at Schatz Bearing?
Well, as you'd expect, they line up with the product lines that we focus on, and that's aerospace bearings. So aerospace bearings, the aero is more for the civil aviation, commercial aviation, so aircraft bearings. And then on the space side, it's space bearings, or bearings that are used in satellite bearings. So that's our primary market is aerospace. But then we also get involved in thin section bearings, which have a lot of different applications as far as industries go. But it's what you'd expect if you don't know bearings. They're bearings with thin walls, I guess, or cross sections. So the from the ID to the OD of the bearing is thin, and so you can have a pretty large diameter bearing, but it's pretty thin cross section, and so it's used in applications where weight or space are at a premium. So you got to really, because some of these applications, if you're sending something up to space, ounces matter.
Yeah.
Because for every ounce, there's a certain phenomenal amount of money that it costs to send that up into space. So they're very weight conscious. So space, I mentioned thin section bearings, medical bearings for medical applications. I joke that the world of ball bearings seems pretty ordinary, but when you think about some of the applications that we're in, I mean, we're on the Mars rover, and we're in the James Webb Space Telescope, which is out there. And I talk to people at work. I said, can you imagine that what you were holding in your hand several months ago is now millions of miles away or on another planet? It's kind of mind-boggling to think of.
Yeah. That's so cool. Yeah, that's so cool to think about where it's at now.
Yeah, or
Yeah,
new
like you said.
like these eVTOL, which is electric vertical takeoff and landing. Basically flying cars and surgical robots, and so we got a lot of really interesting applications. If you dive in, maybe the bearing itself, if someone looks at it, isn't that exciting, but to see what we're doing to support some of these things is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's all. And Bonnie just made another Fletch reference. So a lot of Fletch references today, Steve. So a lot of fun here today. So guys, again, think about your company, whatever you manufacture. What are your core strengths? What are you absolutely best at? And if this whole search strategy, SEO, if it's new to you, your core strengths are your keywords. So like Steve just said, we're looking at like space bearings, aerospace bearings, thin section bearings. So those are, you want to laser focus on what you're best at. Damon, we always preach, when you try to be everything to everybody, what do you become?
Nothing to no one.
Nothing to no one, right? We want to niche down till it hurts so good.
Yeah.
So focus on what you're best at. Focus on that lane. And so, Steve, what I love what you did is you niched down. You started focusing on who's that ideal buyer. We go around, we call them our soulmates. You identified that soulmate. Now, once you understood that soulmate and had a better understanding, okay, like what problem do they have? What challenge are they facing today? What keyword are they using? Because so often, we were like, hey, we know what we're typing. We know what we call it, but do they know the same thing? So we've spent a lot of time kind of getting an understanding of what does that engineer, what challenge are they facing right now that they're going to type. Now, Kim, I'm sliding back over to you. What you did an amazing job from an architectural standpoint on the website, taking that buyer persona, that soulmate, understanding their needs, their challenges, their motivations, and then those keywords that we've mentioned with Steve, these space bearings, thin section bearings. And what's cool, Steve, like you're educating me, like, hey, these are going in drones, these are going in satellites. So they're, helicopters. It's not just, planes. There's a lot of diversity there. But Kim, talk a little bit about how did you attack the architecture of working with Steve and the team going into those RICs?
Yeah, so I think what I did was take a look at their current site architecture, kind of tried to put my hat on if I were as a purchasing agent, which was one of the buyer personas, versus the engineer. Mm-hmm. And what am I going to care about? And I think what was cool about Schatz is there's so much to be proud of, right? The fact that they are in New York State, they employ a lot of really smart people. They really care, it's all about customer service, right? And if you look at their tagline, it is flexible, versatile, responsive. And that's not just a tagline. It's something that they reminded me of multiple times throughout this whole process. But it wasn't, besides the tagline, it really wasn't coming across if I'm an engineer in any other way. So really focusing on the fact that they're made, especially with local supply chains being very important right now. If you can buy and be able to depend on your supplier, that's a key competitive advantage. So making sure that came across throughout the website, the quality that they take to heart, all of the engineering information that kind of was a little bit buried, we brought to the forefront again to help with the evaluation process in that part of the buyer journey. And we kind of just separated out, they were commingling industry information with the product catalog. And so it was very dense and vertical at the same time. And we just kind of teased those apart in order to make it easier to really, if you're coming in through the door of really from an industry standpoint, how am I going to want to learn about ball bearings if I'm coming from an industry standpoint versus if I'm really just curious, what are the parts in the catalog, what's available to me, and drilling down that way. So we kind of teased those things apart, and then added some more evaluation content around it. We didn't really do a lot with the look and feel yet. I'm hoping that's something we'll be able to tackle. One of my favorite stories, I love the facts. One of Steve's early questions to me was, are fonts important? And I was like, wow, he gets it, right? Because the fonts are important. And some people don't realize that, and their website their content looks like a ransom note, right? So you want to make sure that you're paying attention to those brand touch points that include typography as you get farther down the road. But we really had to build the foundation, and the information architecture is like I use house analogies a lot because it's just very easy to understand, but we've built that foundation. We know how many rooms we have. We know, how many floors, so we've built some of those foundations, and the next is going to be really getting to that next level. Websites are always an evolution.
Yeah.
And you drop this, your content looks like a ransom note. I love that. Because you get on websites and some of the fonts are so goofy, and what a lot of people don't realize, it needs to be clear. It might not be the most artistic, but when you can just read it easily, that's a huge thing. It's a huge thing. Understanding that.
Absolutely. And I want to give a couple quick shout outs. So Steve, and here's networking here. Let's tie in a few things right here. Okay. You talk about how important is LinkedIn. Okay. I was connected with, Damon, we did a couple webinars back in the fall. A dear friend showed up at one of the SBDC webinars that we did, Linda, and she owns a marketing firm at Essentials. Here she's a marketer and want to learn some new tactic strategies. She connects. She comes through our training, last fall. She was like, man, you need to meet my client, Steve, at Pomeroy at Schatz. Steve comes in. So then now what I do is I'm like, hey, let's bring Wesleyan Greer in, because Wesleyan is a B2B sales guru, knocks it out of the park, understands who that ideal customer is. I'm like, man, this architecture is way out of my league. I need to bring in the superstar. Kim comes in. Now, also, I want to give a shout out to our dear friend, Steve Melito. Damon, Steve very well.
Steve,
great advocate. I know Dan Bigger, you're good friends with Steve. Guys, if you're out there, Steve, we're sending our love to you, brother. But Steve is a content king on helping folks. So what Steve Pomeroy did is like, how do you bring in this other subject matter experts to, make this a good, viable process to make your life easier, because you're trying to produce great widgets out there. This whole digital marketing thing is a little bit new. Now, Kim, you pointed out to Steve, Steve, your 3 bullet points that you love to share with clients. You have it on your website, you have it on your LinkedIn headline, all over the place. Can you talk about how did you create those 3? And Kim, you said, I view it as like your war cry, right? Steve, talk a little bit about like, how did you create it's versatile, responsive, flexible, right? Is it
flexible, versatile, responsive? I think
flexible, versatile, responsive.
It's part of like you mentioned, if you're trying to be everything to everyone, you're nothing. We're a small company competing with large organizations. So these large organizations, they have deep pockets when it comes to finances. They have lots of personnel. So we're not going to outspend them. We're not going to out-resource them. But I think that, and this is, again, nothing that's new. It's really how you execute the strategy. But bigger companies have a hard time doing things quickly. So when there's a design that has a deadline and you got to get a prototype out to someone, that's not what they're good at, whereas we're great at it. And so I think it was natural that that's something that we wanted to be. It's basically a flexible, versatile, responsive. Now, I would say our competitors are mostly versatile. They have a wide product lines, but flexible and responsive, it's hard for them to be that. And I think that's why we do what we do. And so it's easy to say it. Now, the day-to-day, it's hard to do it. So but that's what we strive for all the time. In fact, that's, you mentioned right at the outset, Kurt, well, it's nice to see something written down that you had. I think that's the one nice thing about a strategy is that I think it's good to write it down and communicate it to everybody and say, this is what we're striving for. So if anybody in the organization feels like we're deviating from that, then they speak up and we can try to fix things. So,
right. And that's the simplicity of like that 3-word war cry. Because every time you're having a meeting, whether it's in operations, finance, marketing, sales, whatever it might be, you can just simply ask, does it fit our 3 criteria? Does it help us become flexible? Are we responsive? I think it's fantastic. And so, Kim, I thought you did an amazing job of like pulling that in. And now, as that company war cry, Steve, your team, you're trying to eat, drink, breathe, sleep, this mantra, if you will, and it resonates with the customers and clients. So I know we're coming into time. I'm having too much fun. We could keep going. Steve, I have a couple quick last questions here. So you mentioned industries that you serve, aerospace. We talked about, like the thin section bearings, medical bearings. What are I know on your website you have like mil spec and like what go into like some of the industries and you mentioned like, hey, this product goes on the Mars and some of the other things. What are some of the other products or industries that you're serving at Schatz?
Well, I felt that mentioned being in New York and doing most of our sourcing from U.S. companies. We're in the defense industry and we're made in the USA, which is I think these days less and less common. Although on the plus side, it is becoming more common.
It's coming back, man. All the cool kids are going into manufacturing, Steve. That's what we say in this show here. All the cool kids are in manufacturing.
Going in manufacturing.
Yeah. So I didn't mention the defense side of things. We're in applications like the F-35, the Joint Strike Fighter. A number of other. I mean, it's not all airborne. There's ground vehicles, missiles, so that the guidance systems on missiles. So we do a lot of work in the defense industry as well. But those are I would say the main things: the aerospace, medical, semiconductor, defense, and then also we do a lot of custom work. That's the part of being flexible. The bigger companies, to move the needle, they have to move a lot of product, which tends to be the high volume stuff. Whereas for us, we'll customize just about anything. We'll if someone comes in and says, well, this standard product doesn't quite work, but if you could change the clearance of the material, we'll do it. And I think the thing that I will also tout is that on the technical side, we have great application engineering capabilities. So if someone knows that they need to make something work, but they don't know bearings well enough to make it work, we can make it work for them.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
That's a plus
and it's how you can be responsive, right? Because if you don't have the knowledge to first of all, know if something's going to work, and then B, get it made, it's you can't be responsive. And a lot of the big companies, they're really good at making this thing, lots of it, and doing that, but you can be flexible and responsive in making that what they need specifically.
Well, in fact, you bring up a good point, Damon, that responsiveness is not just when you're making the product, it's throughout the whole process. So if initial contact, if a customer comes in with a question, sometimes our competition can take, a long time to answer that question, or maybe not answer it at all. So we talk about how we, are we responsive to those questions? Are we responsive to follow-ups from customers? Throughout the whole, the whole experience. So it is important.
Well, that's absolutely fantastic. So guys, as we're coming into time, let's do this, Steve. So how about let's give a little shout out to FuseHub, an amazing team. So a couple we mentioned, obviously we've got Kim here. We mentioned Steve Melito. Elena Garuk is the just fearless leader, director of FuseHub. She's absolutely amazing. So Steve, from your perspective, you're a manufacturer out there in another state, and you're like, boy, this sounded like a really good program. And Kim, you did mention WDI, Workforce Development Institute. So what MEPs have access to is they can go out and help manufacturers find grant funds with initiatives, and they help with like lean initiatives, ISO. And I know, Stephen, we didn't even get to this. You have all sorts of certifications, correct, at Schatz?
Yep. So, AS 9100, our heat treat system is NADCAP approved. So yes, we got our cybersecurity all buttoned up, the NIST 800 171. So yeah, but to be in the industries that we're in, you have to have those kinds of
Right. So, and that's great. And again, at Schatz Bearing, they have all sorts of different, and Steve, I know you have it right on your website. I know you have it listed right on your LinkedIn profile. Again, please connect with Steve. As you can tell, just humble man of integrity. Just Steve, it's just such an honor, blessing working with you. If there's a manufacturer out there in another state, would you, and how about a shameless plug for Kim? What's your experience been working with the MEP this past year?
It's been phenomenal. Like I said, we've had I wouldn't call them false starts, but just not hasn't been the full picture in trying to find an organization to help us with our website, social media, that kind of thing. And so just as you mentioned before, Kurt, you have a whole kind of stable of experts that are there to pull in to help, and in this day and age, that's what's needed. But Kim's been great. She's we'll talk about responsive. She's really responsive, and she really knows exactly what she's talking about when it comes to the background, the detail, and so forth. So I have no hesitation recommending this whole process to any small company. I mean, if you have your own in-house, experts in all of these areas, then obviously you don't need this. But there's a whole ton of small companies that are out there. It just doesn't make sense to have somebody like, a whole 5-6 people on their staff. And so for those companies out there, I think it's a perfect fit. I really believe that.
Well, it's been
awesome.
Just what a wonderful experience. And so, Kim, I'm going to slide over to you. What's fantastic, just share with the folks. So, again, if they're new to the MEP, I'm jumping around here. Damon, what we love is, like SBDCs, MEPs, they are great resources for entrepreneurs, manufacturers out there. You're not alone. You're not in a silo. Like Val's with us today. Kim, you and I met right on site. Had a wonderful tour at Monofrax at Val's facility. But if you're,
still talking about that,
if you're a manufacturer or you're a marketer to the manufacturer, you're not alone. You're not in a silo. Kim, just share for folks like, man, this MEP thing's kind of new, or I knew the MEP. I knew I got my ISO certification from them. But you have access to a bunch of subject matter experts that you can pull in. Just as we close out, just share with folks, like, how does that work at FuseHub of pulling in other subject matter experts?
Yeah, so first of all, you would go on our website, and for anyone who just wants an assessment, there's no one that comes to us and say, I just have this one problem. Yes. They come to our website and they talk about all the challenges that they have. And when you peel back the onion, you can really see a little bit about what the multi-pronged approach might be, including prioritization of what to tackle first. So going to our website and filling out the request a consultation, there's a link right at the top of the website, and all the buttons on the slider go to being able to request a consultation. You'll have an expert talk to you for at least 30 minutes or as long as you want about what you're trying to accomplish. And then it's basically a team approach. If there's a marketing component, I'll be pulled in, or Steve will be pulled in he can tackle it from multiple points. We have manufacturing experts, design experts on staff. So really, we just pulled together the right team. And then we've got university relationships across the state as well. So there's just so many SMEs or subject matter experts to tap into, and we have partner relationships with all of them.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And just to kind of throw in, you have NIST, so you have access to federal info. And Damon, we've interviewed a couple of folks from NIST, and so Steve, you mentioned like cybersecurity or other areas. So again, as a small manufacturer, say you have 20, 30, 40 employees, or even 100 employees, you can't be everything. You can't cover every department. So workforce development, again, operational excellence, and of course, what's a little bit new here is this whole digital transformation. And this is a great case study of how FuseHub, at the New York MEP, rolled up their sleeves to come in to help out Steve. So, Steve, let's take it home, brother. Any parting words of wisdom, anything that you want to share as far as how do you see the future? What's going on at Schatz? What's on the horizon?
Oh, I think, it's been the pandemic has been rough on the aerospace industry, but like I said earlier, I have all the confidence in the world that the people that are there, financially we're strong. It's just a matter of getting from where we are here to the future. But I think, the future was bright for us prior to the pandemic. It's going to be heading back in that direction, I hope, when it comes to a pandemic. Um, so yeah, I'm I feel really fortunate to not only have the people at Schatz, but the folks. It is it, no one person can make something an organization work, and so all of these inputs are really important. So I'll just also just throw it back to you, Kurt, and Kim mentioned pulling in these subject matter experts. I've been really impressed with the whole process there. All the different people that have contributed to the process so far for our digital transformation have been excellent. So I thank you for that.
Yeah, we're blessed with a great team. And, it takes a village to raise a business, doesn't it? Is that what the saying goes?
Certainly does.
Takes a village. So, all right, last question for you guys. Ready? Steve, you sitting down for this one? You ready? Kim, you ready? Okay, last question of the day. Steve, we've talked about, we've become close friends. We've talked family, dad and your teenagers. Who inspires you today? Who inspires you personally, business-wise? Who's your inspiration today?
Who is my inspiration today? I don't know. I don't want to be corny, but it's, my daughter's graduating from high school soon.
Yeah.
And she's got such a great group of friends. Are so smart. They the stuff that they know. I don't know if it's the impact of the internet, but the stuff that they know now that I couldn't scratch that surface when I was. So I guess what inspires me is what's coming behind us. The kids, they've been through a really tough time with the pandemic, and they're just coming out swinging. So I'm sometimes you say, well, these kids, they didn't do what we had to do. I'm really impressed with them. So I'm
awesome
by what's coming behind us. And
I agree with you 110%.
Yeah.
It drives me crazy when I hear, you know what? Back in the 80s, let's go see what we were doing back in the 80s, right? So, Kim, I know you've a couple of wonderful children. Your inspiration, who inspires you today?
That's a good question. Well, I was just thinking the other day that my sister impressed the heck out of me because she's been making her kids go to extra math school for many years now. And I'm like, I should have done that with my kids. Extra math young. So that's my mantra now.
So, all right. So what's your sister's name?
Katie.
Katie. And Steve, what's your daughter's name?
Julia.
All right. So, hey, thank you guys. Great shout out to our inspiring for the next generation. Kim, your sister, thank you for sharing that. So, guys, we're going to wind down. First off, thank you, everybody here who joins us every Friday. Man, Damon and I,
thanks so much.
Never take this for granted. We're so honored and privileged that you hang out with us on Fridays. We have such a great time bringing on amazing people like Steve and Kim here. So, Kim, thank you for everything. You've become a dear, close friend. Damon, I get text messages from Kim, she's a volleyball phenomenon. She's like spiking.
I know.
Man, she's like relentless on a volleyball course. She's on a golf course. So Kim, you're an inspiration to me. Steve, thank you for your friendship and the honor and privilege of working with you this past year. I learned something new from you every time we get together. And I just thank you for inviting us into your business and being a part of your journey. So it's an honor, privilege. Thank you both so much. Damon, my God, we never go this. It was like a record.
I know.
So this
was a good one.
Good. So, guys, thank you. Have an amazing, incredible weekend. Keep spreading your awesomeness to everybody. Go keep fighting for manufacturing in the U.S. here. Damon, take it away, brother.
Wow. Thanks so much, Kurt. Turning it over here. I want to just thank everyone for stopping by and listening to us today as we were taking a deep dive inside of this manufacturing digital transformation for Schatz Bearing, talking about FuseHub with Kim Lloyd, talking about Schatz Bearing with Steve Pomeroy. It's just such a great experience for us to hear and listen and understand and learn from you guys. And thanks so much, everyone, for being here every week. Kurt says it. I just can't say it. Just fills my heart to see people and just to think that two crazy dudes like us people actually listen and we have fun with it. It's just
I
such a
know,
great
I'm
time for
surprised too. I have to say, I'm very surprised.
There you go. We have a good time with this. It's awesome. Thanks so much for being here. Have an awesome weekend. We'll be talking soon.
See you guys.